But you don't see what's happening, do you?
What? It's over here.
The BFA thing is not. It's not for you anymore. It's not for people like you that want that hardcore experience. It's not for you.
I know.
If you want that, you can play Classic. And the same is true for people that want that hardcore experience, but BFA doesn't offer it. They can just go play fucking Classic.
Right?
So they don't need to cater to one audience or the other.
Because they have two games.
Both.
Well, I certainly hope that's not the case.
My biggest fear is that Blizzard might, and this is my biggest fear, this is like being ultra pessimistic about things, is Blizzard might look at what's happening here and say, right, we can go, all the really hardcore guys who like RPGs like heavily, they'll go to Classic, right? And that means for the guys who stay with BFA and stay with whatever Blizzard's current plan is for retail, is that they will make that ever more casual and mobile phone game friendly.
So I do agree with Preach and McConnell in the direction that Blizzard is going to go. And it's because really they have two communities, right? They have the retail community and the classic one. And this seems to me like a very similar situation that played out in RuneScape. And I see many people comparing the situation of what's happening now in Classic to RuneScape back then. So my main purpose with this video is to give an example and context to why this situation is so similar to people that have never even played RuneScape, and why the Classic community needs to learn from the success of old school RuneScape. So for people that have never played RuneScape, I'm going to give you a brief context of what the game used to look like before it all went to shit. At the core of RuneScape is 23 skills that you can max out to level 99. But most of those skills actually take months to even years to max out. This made the game extremely grind heavy, but also very rewarding when you finally reached your goal. On top of that, there were no auction houses in RuneScape. Instead, there were areas and pockets of the world where sellers and buyers would gather up and basically trade and sell their goods to each other. If you can imagine just like 300 people in Elwyn Forest all selling and buying to each other, and this is where the whole market used to flock to these areas. And this kind of system really forced you to interact with other players in the world. But in 2007, this was really the beginning of the end for RuneScape, when they basically made equal trading limits. So if I can elaborate, if Asmongold bought a leather belt for 3 gold, and then he would take his leather belt to these merchant areas, and he would type in selling leather belt for 20 gold. And a newer player that wanted that leather belt would trade Asmongold 20 gold. And so essentially, Asmongold pocketed 17 gold and made a profit off of him. And the developers thought that this was horrendous. This wasn't a fair game. So what they did was, when the trading window popped up, it would force you to buy that leather belt for the value that it was actually worth. And you couldn't get more and you couldn't get less from it. And this was a great and fair system, but it also destroyed the trading system and economy of the whole entire game. And on top of all these changes, they began to introduce more powerful items to help you level up, and more instant-based content that would give you massive EXP bonuses for doing them. And this essentially destroyed the very grind-heavy version of the game that made it more compelling and more fulfilling to grind for months and years these particular skills. And now you could do it in a week. And so it fundamentally divided the RuneScape community into two halves. One side of the community wanted instant gratification, and the other side longed for the days where the game was grind heavy, more community based, and more rewarding overall. And so, as you can imagine, private servers started popping up like crazy. that implemented Classic RuneScape. And while the retail version of RuneScape was bleeding subscribers, the classic RuneScape community in these private servers were flourishing. So after years of the community fighting back to bring back Classic RuneScape, Jagex finally held a vote to bring back old school RuneScape, and the community finally won their fight.
So that means that he actually wants more content after Nax. I wonder if he's worried though about, like, I don't know, like I'd be curious to hear what his response would be whenever I said, you know, like how I feel. I'm just worried about Blizzard messing it up. I wonder what he would say about that.
So in the beginning stages of old school RuneScape, nobody trusted Jagex. In fact, most people hated Jagex because of what they did to the older version of the game. But however, when all the original content was already consumed by the majority of the player base, there was a split between the no change party and the group that wanted innovation in the style of the original game. So that's when the voting system emerged. And there was certain level requirements and hours played in game in order for you to even vote. And what this did was that it weeded out the players that didn't really understand what made RuneScape, and the players that may have been inclined to vote for systems or items that would destroy the balance of the game for the sake of convenience. And so this also works because the majority of the player base in old school RuneScape saw what caused the destruction of the former version of RuneScape. And so whenever the developers bring in some bullshit to the game or to the voting polls, the community starts to scream out, oh, here comes new RuneScape, here comes the end of the game. It's 2007 all over again. And they downvote the shit out of whatever the developers put into the polls. And so this provides a safeguard versus the developers. It also encourages new innovation in the style of the old game, but it also involves the community, and it kind of sets them on the ground floor of how they want old school RuneScape to evolve in the future. So how would this pan out for Classic WoW? So in order for you to even vote, you need to be level 60, max out 2 professions, and have spent 400 hours of playtime. Now I think these requirements give insight to the players and knowledge to understand why they love Classic WoW and why retail WoW is dying. And this also weeds out players that would vote yes to mechanics like looking for raid or titan forging. This also makes the development team accountable to the player base because they know all of the ideas that they put forth on the polls will be voted on by players. What the system also opens up is homegrown community ideas, like from people like Asmongold or Preach, that we know the philosophy of Classic WoW and will further innovate this game. I don't think we can trust Blizzard anymore to make content. I think we need to put the future of Classic WoW in the hands of players that truly love and understand the game.
I don't think Classic Plus content is as much of a sure thing as BC is. I think BC is going to make a lot more people happy. Classic Plus content has the chance of hurting the game, whereas BC content does not, because it would probably be created on a separate server. And I just feel like it would be an overall safer bet for Blizzard to make, and it would just be common sense.
Now, while many people say that Wrath of the Lich King was the beginning of the end because of the implementation of looking for dungeon mechanics, however, I do believe that part of the long-term philosophy Blizzard has now is because of the launch of the Burning Crusade. Now, I'm not saying TBC was an amazing expansion. In fact, the Burning Crusade set the bar for what end game content should be in World of Warcraft. But isn't that the problem? Isn't that the opposite reason of why we're so excited to go back to Classic? To have a meaningful world where the game doesn't solely rely on you leveling up as fast as you can so that you can reach the end game? I mean, that's what every single expansion has focused on since the Burning Crusade. And over time, it made the world smaller and less relevant. In fact, I don't even think expansions should be in Classic. And I'm not saying that expansions aren't fun. I mean, in fact, they're a huge revenue boost for Blizzard. And it allows the reset for gear and itemizations to happen. And for the first couple of months, they're a blast. But expansions is what killed the world in World of Warcraft. So let's not be so quick to allow Blizzard to make old content irrelevant and leveling irrelevant, to introduce flying so that we can't be immersed in this amazing world that we're living in. To allow Blizzard to do what every single major company is doing right now by rebooting a dying genre for the sake of a quick cash grab because it's safer and innovation is too hard. We need a brand new timeline from retail WoW that allows the player base to innovate classic WoW and keep Blizzard in check. Otherwise, if we let Blizzard release these old expansions, in 10 years, we'll end up with the re-release of BFA. So I hope everybody enjoyed this deep dive on how old school RuneScape can help out classic WoW. And if you disagree with my opinions, give me your counterpoints and tell me I'm full of shit in the comments below. Until next time, guys.